Hi, my name is Jimmy Williams with NFL Draft Diamonds, and I have another diamond in the rough for you guys today. His name is Tyler Adams. He's a wide receiver out of Butler, formerly out of Harvard. Nice to have you, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So, got ourselves a former Ivy League grad. So, I guess the assumption is he's got to be a smart cookie. And I know lately, you did very well at some pro days, opened up some eyes for some scouts. So, we'll talk about that a little later. But Tyler, why don't you go ahead and kind of set the stage? Tell us where you're from and walk us through this journey a bit.
Yeah, so originally from Louisville, Ohio, which is about 15 minutes from Canton, Ohio. So big football area in northeastern Ohio. So a lot of fun to play there in high school. Kind of a smaller high school. I'd say we had about 270 in my graduating class. So it'd be like every few years, maybe we'd send somebody to a bigger Division I program. But really just a well-coached team. When I was in high school, my head coach was the school's winningest coach, John DeMarco, and he's still coaching around the area now, but was getting recruited mainly by the Ivy League, some Patriot League, and then the MAC was kind of bouncing in and out of there, Toledo, Ohio U, those kind of schools. So really it came down to Harvard and Yale for me, ironically. And I remember Coach Lamb was one of the first guys that reached out to me in the recruiting process. So Harvard kind of stuck with it all the way through. And I think that meant a lot to me, that loyalty. And then just visiting on campus felt like a great fit. So kind of ended up there. And then I'm sure we might touch on a little bit later, but my journey through Harvard kind of in career with a lot of roller coasters with injuries and whatnot. And then coming out of that process, the Ivy League does not do red shirts unless it's medical. So for me, with taking time off with COVID or all that stuff, and coming off of an injury, I felt like it'd be more beneficial just to go try and get a second degree and then see if I can kind of plug and play at another similar size school like Butler. And that's kind of how it all shaped out. And thankfully was healthy for the season and really enjoyed my time there. Similar demographic in the locker room and fit right in with the guys in the system. So it definitely all worked out and came full circle.
Cool. So, I was wondering how to say that city. You said Louisville, not Louisville.
Yeah.
And when I first look at that, that's what I think of. But obviously, Ohio guys. So let's kind of uh, go back there a little bit and just kind of recap a lot. So, playing there in high school, did you play any other positions rather than other than the wide receiver position?
Yeah, they definitely bounce me around at receiver. So I mean, I play slot, outside, backside, and DX, and they use me in a lot of ways. Played a few snaps at running back in different packages, and when I was a younger guy, if we had guys hurt, they could kind of plug me in there. And then was our main return guy, so punt return, kick return. And then my senior year, I was playing both ways, so I was playing corner as well. So just flipping ends of the field and staying on the field as much of the game as possible.
Interesting. And also in my notes, football wasn't your only sport. You also did some baseball too. So elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, my family is big baseball family. Dad played at Ohio University in college. One of my older brothers played at a smaller school called Malone. And so I was definitely involved a lot with baseball when I was younger, all the summer ball and travel ball stuff, and mostly played middle infield, shortstop, and was batting leadoff. So it definitely gave me something in the spring to do and kind of shut off football for 2 or 3 months and then get right back into it in summer workouts. But yeah, I kind of bounced around. I played basketball for a couple years and then would just like show up to track meets when they needed me to run. We didn't have baseball. So kind of a jack of all trades, I guess.
Interesting. So, anyone give you any offers at all to play some baseball or what?
I had some interest late. The same school my brother played at offered me pretty early, and had kind of just said, let's see where the recruiting process goes. But I felt like I knew my sophomore, junior year of high school that I could be pretty talented at football, and was in a real small football town. So there was a lot of hype around that, and I just love the atmosphere and the preparation leading up to it. So I felt like I figured it out pretty quick that I'd have to make a decision between the two. And I asked Harvard actually if I could try and play both, but it was more like you're in the Ivy League. It's going to be tough with school to try and go do both. So football was definitely number one, though. I figured that out pretty quick in high school.
So you've kind of answered this a little bit, but I just want you to elaborate on it. Why football? Why do you love this game, and why did you choose to pursue it?
Yeah, it's kind of strange because my family is just, I mean, I had a brother that played in high school, but I have three older brothers, two of them didn't play, and my dad never really played in high school. So it's kind of like I'm the oddball here between baseball and football, but I just fell in love with the aspect that you get 10 guaranteed games in a high school season, and you do all this preparation for 9 months to play for 3 months, and then all week to play one day. And I just love that buildup. I think that's part of what makes it a little more sweet when you get a win and you make a big play, is that behind the scenes you've done all this work just to get to that one point. Whereas it was great like baseball getting to play every couple of days, but I knew that if I went 0 for 3 one day, I could come back the next day and go 3 for 4 or 4 for 4. And football, there's very little margin for error. So I think that really kind of excited me, that I knew in the off season everything that I had been doing was going to be shown on Friday nights, and just that build up got me ready to play.
Yeah, it definitely pushes you to be the best and pursue excellence because you don't want to screw up when it's game time.
Right.
So, um, so growing up there in Ohio, who are you a big fan of, man? Like, were you a fan of one of the local teams or somebody else?
Yeah, I took some heat from a lot of my friends. My dad's from Pittsburgh, so we were big Steelers fans, but I'm in
Ah,
Browns country there, so there was always a little rivalry going on.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, uh you're putting yourself in a position where you might get into some fights, so let's just be
Yeah.
real. So who are you a big fan of, like as a player? I mean, is there a guy in the league that maybe you try to study their film, maybe model your own game after, or what?
Well, when I was in high school, Julian Edelman was kind of at like the prime of his career. They were going through those Super Bowl runs, and I got to college. I read his book actually and tried to kind of take note of everything that he was doing in preparation for the season and how he was surrounding himself with guys in the off season and just making deliberate choices to try and excel himself during the season. So that was definitely one guy. I enjoyed watching Antonio Brown when he was in Pittsburgh just because we were there all the time, and I had I had such an enthusiasm for him because I knew he was an undersized guy and had kind of been doubted, counted out. And I'd go watch games on Sundays, and it's like, where'd Antonio Brown go? And then he stands up with the ball. So from like an explosive playmaker side, he was fun to watch too.
Yeah, well, you yourself, I mean, I don't think you're too undersized. I mean, you're about the average, I would say. I mean, having you listed at about 5'11", 195 pounds, right? That
Yep.
hasn't changed much since your pro day, has it?
No, not at all.
So, yeah, I mean, and so as a receiver, I mean, you can pick a little bit of, guys' game from all over. So,
Yeah, for
nice.
sure.
Like we had mentioned, you went first to Harvard and then eventually finished up at Butler. And of course, in between, a whole lot of adversity, whether it be going through this pandemic or whatever. But Tyler, I feel like the one thing that really defines a character is how he responds to adversity. And so I kind of want to, pose that question to you. Give me an example of how you have responded to adversity in your own personal collegiate career.
Yeah. So I'd be happy to just take you through my story, and I'm sure it'll kind of sell itself. But starting back at COVID, we all kind of went. Well, obviously the Ivy League season had been canceled, so that was definitely frustrating for us. We had like Boston College down the road, playing NC State, but we weren't able to be on campus and practice. But I had a trainer that I had met in Boston the year prior. His name's Dana Barry, and I loved working out with him. He had me in, some of the best shape of my life during my college career. So for me, it was important to just stay in a football atmosphere during that time and not lose sight of that. So we actually got a group of guys who wanted to be near campus, and probably 15 or 20 guys that we would go in with Dana during the summer, during COVID, and then the fall as well when we weren't playing, just to keep like a competitive drive, and stay in that football environment. And then going back in the spring of 21, we were still very limited on what we could do practice wise. So it was taking a while to roll out these protocols and get us out of these phases. So we went out the one day and did like a player run workout, and I ended up tearing my ACL, which was frustrating
Mm.
because the next week then we're back at practice and I couldn't be out there. So that was definitely kind of the big obstacle number one. And at that time, I got the surgery from Brian McKeon, who was with the Celtics and the Bruins for a while, and really trusted him and kind of what he had to say. So I went with him as my surgeon, and then it was my intention to play because I was going into my senior year, but I knew I only had like 6 months to get ready. So I entered the portal just kind of as like to get the ball rolling and figure out what I could do the following spring. I was graduating in December, so it was my plan to get healthy and then enroll early somewhere for spring ball. But number one intention was to play, for sure. And was up in Boston for the next 5 months or so up until the preseason started. Was working with a couple physical therapists through my surgeon or through Harvard, seeing my surgeon on a monthly basis and just trying to figure out the best way to attack everything. And then I'd say going into September, right around when the season started, I think it became a very realistic possibility that I could play, and was out at practice, kind of doing things off to the side, running routes, conditioning. And then I ended up passing about 2 or 3 rounds of physicals. I went in with my surgeon, passed one there, went back to Harvard. They gave me a second physical. And then our team doctor was like, well, I got to clear you still. So I went through a third and
Mm.
got through all of that. And probably about 2 weeks later, I was back on the field. So I played 2 games in October and ended up tearing it again on a punt return. So at this point, I was like, well, who knows now? I got about 8 or 9 months to get ready for camp. I'm going through a second surgery. I got to enter the portal because I was graduating from Harvard and they don't let grad students play. So
Mm.
there was kind of a lot coming down on me at once. And Dana, who I had been working out with previously, had just went down to Georgia to pursue opening up a gym there. And he basically called me and was like, if you're serious about playing, I got a whole team down here that can help you. And I got an open bedroom. So I was like, all right, I got nothing to lose at this point, right? So I'm going to go down. So I was working full time, virtually, and I was training with Dana every morning, like 6 a.m. And then afternoons, I go to his ACL specialist. And then there were a couple of times where I went to like chiropractors. And so I had a whole team. I was very well taken
Mm.
care of. And late in the spring, I actually committed to Arkansas State. We had a receiver coach from Yale who I had played against, so he remembered me, Derek Lett. So I went over there, and I was actually in Arkansas for like 3 days, and it didn't feel like home. So their roster had moved around a little bit, and I was a little uneasy coming off an injury because I knew that I really only had one chance to get this right. So Butler had been recruiting me pretty heavily. And at that point, I already told him I thought I was going to Arkansas State. And I called up Coach Holmes, who's at Butler now as the receiver coach, and was basically just like, hey, is this offer still on the table? Like, I'm still interested. And right away he got back to me. So I knew that I was a priority there, and they were confident in me coming off an injury. So about 8 months after my surgery, I was back at fall camp. And then right around 9 months after surgery was the first game, and was thankfully healthy all year. So there's been a lot of hoops to jump through, but it's all come around the right way, and I'm glad I got an opportunity now.
Wow. I mean, just a lot to kind of take in. I mean, um, injuries suck. It is a part of the game, though. It certainly happens. And it seems like the one thing that you responded with is just I don't know, man, just kind of sheer determination and attitude, and the fact like this no quit kind of attitude, like I'm gonna play this game, like I'm gonna get myself healthy. I mean, I'm gonna do whatever it takes, and you eventually put yourself in a position where you did get back on the field. I mean, you did play for Butler, and so let's kind of get to talking a little bit more about some football. So how would you describe the difference between the offenses like there at Harvard and then when you came to Butler? What do you think was the big difference?
Yeah, I think it was interesting actually. We had a few things that our coaches took from I think Harvard staff was at a maybe one of those clinics and our coaching staff was there. So there were a few things that translated over, which was real good for me that I could just plug in and be ready to go. I think the biggest difference at Butler was the way Coach Uremovich and Coach Holmes kind of operated was very schematic to the point where we almost knew going into the game which plays we were going to run with which packages and which formations. And so I think at Harvard it was more general. We still game planned really hard, but we just wanted to have the flexibility to run any play out of any formation at any point in the field. And we had a script that we followed, obviously, like any other program, and our coaching staff did a great job. But I think Coach you and Coach Holmes were more just, hey, this is the only play out of this formation that we really like, and we're only going to run it if we get this look. So we knew going into the week what to expect as far as if the defense is lined up here, these are kind of our tendencies during the week that we want to run these plays. And then versus at Harvard, it was like, well, we could run this play out of cover 2 or cover 4, and we could run it out of 3-by-1 or 2-by-2. So it was both were complicated systems, and definitely there was a lot of game plan and prep that went into it, but just in two very separate ways, which is interesting.
Gotcha. And so how would you describe yourself as a receiver? I mean, obviously, like I had mentioned, I mean, kind of, average, size, but I mean, where did you line up? I mean, just kind of how would you describe yourself as an athlete out there?
Yeah, I think definitely downfield speed is a big thing that I try to utilize because I know it's one of my strengths. And being able to use leverage on routes like a deep post or a deep corner or even a fade ball and just know that I feel like I've got the football IQ to set up the leverage the right way against the DB and then kind of turn on that downfield speed when I see that opening, even if it's for a split second. So I think that explosiveness combined with reliability, I think I take pride in catching everything that's thrown to me. And it's my job to make the quarterback's job easier, but also selfishly as a wide receiver, you want the ball and you may only get the ball 5 or 6 times a game. So every time the ball's in your direction, you got to make it count. So I think definitely explosive downfield and then reliable as well.
And you also got some experience as a special teamer.
Yeah.
So give me some sense as your attitude and approach to being a special teams guy.
Yeah, I think a guy specifically in my position too, coming from a smaller school and kind of working my way up through the draft process, I'm ready to play anything. I mean, my sophomore year at Harvard, I played all 4 special teams, and it wasn't the glamorous stuff either. I wasn't returning punts in my sophomore year. I was playing punt coverage and hold up on punt return and all that stuff. So it's good for me to kind of have that groundwork going into a camp with an NFL team so that I can be ready to go if they throw me in there. But my mentality through that process really is just, only 53 guys are on a roster. So if you can only play one position, your chances are a lot smaller than if you could play 4 or 5. So I'm definitely ready to play special teams when the time comes.
Gotcha. So, Tyler, I want to ask you hopefully a quick question, and it's pretty simple. So, you're in a huddle. That is, if you do run a huddle,
Yeah.
and someone calls a specific play, and so the question is Which one of those routes do you love hearing? Which one is your favorite one to run?
Yeah, I mean, this might be a simple answer, but I think a deep post, just because I have run it so many times in my life, and I always feel like the only way I can be wrong is if I'm wrong. And I just I love setting it up. You know, the first thing I do when I get to the line is look where the corner's leverage is, because I'm immediately thinking if I'm taking my first step inside or going straight to his outside hip. And I think there's a two-way release, and either way, I'm just trying to burst downfield and run by him. And as long as I can set it up the right way at the top of the route, I think it's a big play every time.
Cool. So, why don't you go ahead and walk me through one of those instances, or perhaps maybe your own, like one of your best highlights of your career? I mean, can you walk me through maybe one of your best moments as a collegiate player?
Yeah, man, there's a lot to think through there, but I'd say one of the most fun routes I've ran was at Harvard. We bring me across the formation in a motion, and there'd be an attached tight end, and then I'd kind of be out by myself out wide, and we call a post like that. And I basically had from the hash to the sideline just to do whatever I wanted. I just needed to win. And every time we'd run that motion, we'd see it on film that the corner would start to slide out a little bit, and he wouldn't want to give up the outside. So for me, it was easy. I just attacked right at his outside hip. I knew he was going to keep sliding outside, and then came right underneath of him on the post, and then took it high over the top. But that was definitely one of the most fun routes that I've ran, just because I watched it back, and everything that we were doing in practice translated perfectly to the game. I think one of the most fun experiences though playing was this past fall, my first game back off that injury, and I had like 140 yards and a couple of touchdowns, and on a post too. One of them was. So there's a trend happening, but just my family was there. It felt great to be back in a new program, earn people's respect, and get a big program win. So that was probably the most exhilarating experience of my career.
Great. So Tyler, you finished up your collegiate experience, and you ended up doing, I think, a couple different pro days. So just kind of want to talk through at least some of the results. I mean, first off, pretty darn good 40 time. 4:43 is what I had in my notes. And interestingly enough, I mean, you threw up actually some pretty good reps on the bench, man. I mean, 23. I mean, 23 is something that maybe I would expect from perhaps maybe a running back. So how did you get to some of these numbers? Can you talk to me about, first off, like that, and just kind of the pro day experience overall for you?
Yeah. Well, I've been training here, I mean, through the last 4 years, really in the off season and stuff, between
Sure.
Dana and strength and conditioning programs. And so I've definitely always had that downfield burst, but the biggest thing for me was the 40 starts. So the 40 came out. I mean, I was expecting something in the 4.4s, but even kind of surprised myself there a little bit. And between Dana and Krayshawn Brewer, who I've been working with in Indianapolis the last few months, they both just nailed down my 40 for me. I mean, down to, we're filming every rep, slow mo, watching the first three steps. Where's my foot hitting? Is it under my hip? Is it behind my hip? And just taking all of those analytics and trying to put them in place. That way, when I'm running full speed, I'm not thinking about it. And then from a strength standpoint, I've always taken pride in the weight room, and I've lived with guys who are linebackers or defensive ends, and I'm always trying to give them crap for, you got a receiver who can bench as much as you. So I think that one was just a pride thing, making sure everybody knew that I'm still up there. But I think that just comes from repetition and being in the weight room with our strength coaches at Butler or at Harvard, and just really that one's just hard work. You got a bar coming down to your chest, you better push it back up.
Cool. And then again, those pro days. I mean, once all those pro days were done, I mean, were you approached by some teams? You get an opportunity to talk to some NFL scouts or what?
Yeah, absolutely. At Harvard, I had a handful, probably 6 to 8 teams, but it's tough there because it's such a short period of time. So you don't get a lot of personal one-on-one time with those teams. But then afterwards, kind of got a gauge of interest where teams started reaching out a little bit more. Obviously, the Colts and the Patriots, I worked out for both of them. So there's been a good relationship there. And then some other teams just scattered throughout. Guys like the Seahawks, the Titans, the Bucks, and just at this point, it's really just a lot of phone calls and texts from my agent telling me who's reaching out and what I should be expecting. So it was definitely it was a very fulfilling experience to go to Harvard, and not a lot of people know my name walking in there, and then walking out of there, I got 8 to 10 teams who are texting my agent or calling me and interviewing me. And I think that's kind of where everything came to fruition. And I finally could let my shoulders drop for a second and say, okay, I just wanted an opportunity and I gave myself an opportunity, and now we're here.
So let's just kind of be real for a second. So Tyler, you've got at least 8 to 10 teams fairly interested in you. I mean, you are a legitimate NFL prospect. And I don't know if you've been able to soak that in. I mean, where's your mind at when I say those things?
Yeah, I mean, I got to pinch myself sometimes, definitely. Even walking into like an NFL facility and getting to work out with coaches like Reggie Wayne in Indianapolis or Bill O'Brien in New England. And so it's definitely, there's some moments where you got to step back and appreciate it. But I think at the same time, just talking with guys who are going through the same process out of Harvard too, it's like, this is our circle now. So, we got to get used to this because this is the career path we chose to take, and just trying to keep myself humbled and grounded and be prepared for camp whenever it comes.
Great. Well, I do feel like that's going to eventually come for you. I mean, you will get that opportunity one way or the other. Someone's going to call you at some point. Could be in the draft, could be afterwards, shortly. So that they'll literally just say, "Hey, come to our training camp, and we'll see what happens." So, but I feel like you are going to get that opportunity, especially with, a good portion of the league already on top of you. So as we close up shop with our time, just want to give you the opportunity to talk to the rest of the league, man. Tell them why they need to take a chance on you and what kind of athlete you would be for their program. So go ahead and close us with your pitch.
Yeah, I think from a football standpoint on the field, you're getting a guy that's versatile and that you can kind of plug in at any position, whether it be special teams or really in the slot or out wide. And I think that versatility helps me going into camp, knowing that if we need a guy to throw in there, if we got 2 guys down on punt, or if we got 2 guys down in the receiver room, we have a guy that can bounce around and can be useful for us in multiple ways. And then I think an off the field thing, just mentality wise, is I've been through multiple stages of adversity now, and I totally welcome it. And I think when it hits, my first thought is what's next and what do I need to do to get through it? And I'm never going to waver during adversity, and I'm never going to step back from competition. And it's just the norm for me now. So I expect it. And, I think it's that mentality that'll get me through the struggles of whether it be camp or, team losses or injuries or what have you. But I've just adopted a mentality now that, I need to be prepared for anything. And whenever something happens, it's always what's next. And it's never, what happened. So I think those are my 2 main pitches right there.
Cool. Well, Tyler, I mean, you've definitely gone out there, proven your athleticism, proven your character, your grit, your determination, and the fact that you could be a quality contributor for any NFL team that does give you that opportunity. Just hope the best for you and wish you all the best. Okay.
Yeah, appreciate it, Jimmy. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my story.
Sure, no problem. Tyler Adams, wide receiver, Butler. Check this guy out.